Hello and welcome to my ranking of the top 13 A Series of Unfortunate Events books. I was about to say top 13 Asoue books because that's the title of the video, but I realized how weird it is to say Asoue out loud, but that is always how I read it in my head. Some people like to just say all the letters of the shortening, but since I am non-English, I already have a hard time pronouncing some words, so for me it's easier to just say Asoue rather than being like A-S-O-U-E. So, at first I thought about ranking the episodes of the Netflix show, but then I felt like I needed to rewatch some episodes to do that, so we're gonna begin with the books. And mind you, I have not read the books for years, so I am only gonna go from memory, and it may be that once I reread all of them, I might change my ranking. And with that in mind, I will also say that if I happen to put your favorite book at the bottom, well, just so you know, I like all of the books. There is not a book I disliked. The ones at the bottom simply didn't intrigue me as much, or I don't remember as much. Because sometimes I rank a book lower if it just is that I don't remember anything about it, so I can't really say anything. But I do like all the books, and I really love some of the books. And my videos tend to be longer than they need to be, so I just think we should get right into it. So let's start with number 13, The Carnivorous Carnival. I was unsure how to pronounce it correctly, so I just pronounce it very, very slowly. Now, this is a book where a lot of lore happens. We find out how Olaf always knows where the kids are, and we find some backstory. And all the new characters they introduce are interesting characters, but I also really don't remember that much about it. It really felt like a middle-of-the-road book to just elaborate some things and put some plot points everywhere, and then we're off to grander adventures up the mountains. I can also say that the Netflix adaptations of this book was also the least memorable out of all of them, really. There is one thing in the book that I remember I actually laughed out loud to, though, and that was when they have the show and the audience starts to point out all the freaks, and someone in the audience goes, "Oh, but look at that freak with all the pimples in his face," and the pimpled man answers, "I am a visitor here! I just have problem with my hygiene!" And I, for some reason, thought that was hilarious. And they had this exact joke in the Netflix show, however, in the Netflix show it wasn't as funny.
I am not a freak. I'm a member of the audience. I just happen to have a dermatological condition.
And this isn't a bag of money. These are algebra quizzes.
But I remembered I still was like, hey, they kept that in from the book. Yay! Number 12 is The Miserable Mill. And the thing is, I think that I have placed this not at the 13th because I like the Netflix adaptation a lot. So that kind of makes the book a little better, but the book is also one of the most boring ones to me, because it just seemed a bit out of place that they just work at a fucking lumber mill. And this is also why I like the Netflix choice to not make Mr. Poe drop them off them as the new guardians, and actually have the bottlers themselves hitchhike and trespass into the area, because that felt like it made more sense than them getting dropped off there. The only real thing that I remember about this book is the fact that I pronounced the forest as the Finite Forest, and then I curiously listened to an audiobook that someone had uploaded to YouTube once, and they pronounced it as the Finite Forest. And I was like, aha, it's not finite, it's finite. Okay. I do think it's kind of iconic with Sunny's sword fight in the book too, but other than that, the book is pretty meh, and I know why every single time someone has made like an Asoue AU on on fanfictions, whether it's like an AU where it's more than 3 siblings, or if it's completely other characters that also like live the life of the children in serious unfortunate events. They always like hitchhike to the lumber mill instead of like getting dropped off there. Maybe there is some person out there that thought it was better that the Baudelaires got dropped off at the lumber mill, but I don't think so. I think it's better that they hitchhiked there and trespassed, and that's why they need to work. Number 11 on our list is The Bad Beginning. It's the book that started it all, and for that reason it is pretty iconic. But it's also like very, very much like a starter book. Like, it's a book that just like sets the plot going, so like you know all the characters, blah blah blah. But it's not really that interesting. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is a lot of iconic moments, like the tower where Sunny is caged and Violet saving her. And it's also like really disturbing with Olaf trying to marry Violet. And I also remember that small moment where Violet was about to throw a rock at Mr. Poe and she decided not to do it. And I remember when I meet an AU where the Quagmires instead were the ones that lived through the Baudelaires' lives, Isadora threw the rock at Mr. Poe. Because I was like, yeah, this is my fanfiction and we're gonna change things. This video is not in any way to promote my fanfictions, but I just got reminded of it. Number 10, we have The Reptile Room. And to be honest, I remember much less that happened in this book than what I do with The Bad Beginning. But the reason it's higher is because I like the reptiles and I love Montgomery. And because he is like one of the best guardians, this book gets ranked higher. However, I don't have that much to say about it other than that, honestly. Number 9 is The Wide Window. Something I remember a lot with this book is that the Baudelaires are so sassy in this book. Like, they take no crap from Josephine. And honestly, I think that is pretty iconic from them. I have to say though that I did not learn better grammar despite Josephine's best efforts. It could also be that I read the book in Swedish and not English, so I mean, I have the book in English, but I don't think I have ever read it in English. I have just read it in Swedish. I also love the chapter where they get, like, allergic reactions and all of Klaus's lines is blah 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 blah. It's a very fun little detail. Number 8 is The Slippery Slope. And honestly, for me, all I really care about is the fact that Quigley is here. I mean, of course, there is a lot of moments in this book that is very memorable. The Snow Scouts, for example. I also thought it was an interesting choice that they switched gender on Bruce in the show, and I don't know why they did that, but they did. Also, I may mix this up with the show, but Hugo, Colette, and Kevin just, like, die. I think they only did in the show, but it may be that they also did in a book. I don't really remember what happened to them in the book, honestly. I also thought it was really, really iconic by the white-faced women to, like, just leave Olaf and be like, no, we're not gonna do that. But yeah, the highlight was Quigley, definitely. I am obsessed with the Quagmire triplets, okay? Like, every time one of them appear, I am ecstatic. I also love, like, fans speculating what the private moment between him and Violet was like when they were resting on the mountain slope. Because the most common argument is that they kissed, and they probably did, but I also love the take where, like, someone is like, but what if Violet, like, came out as gay to him and was like, I'm actually in love with your sister. But also, like, I feel like the fandom has establish that no character is like monogamous in this universe. So both can be correct at the same time. Not that Violet would kiss him and then be I'm gay, but rather that she was bi. And also I like the idea of bisexual Violet Baudelaire dating both Quigley and Isadora. I am a multi-shipper. And that's on that. In number 7 we have The Hostile Hospital. No, this was the first book I ever read. And then you might be wondering, but hey, didn't you read the books in order? And no, I did not. And in my defense, this was the only book available for me to read. I remember when I started getting interested in a series of unfortunate events, I had the movie on DVD since I was little, but it wasn't until the Netflix show came out that I was like seriously considering an interest in it. Like, I will look into the consideration of being interested. Okay. But anyway, I went to a bookstore and I asked them if they had the books of a series of unfortunate events, because I thought that now when the Netflix show has come out and that maybe they wanted to promote it by selling the books again. But this lady was like, no, those books are too old, so we don't sell them. And behind her was an entire shelf of Harry Potter books. Need I remind you that the first Harry Potter book came out before a series of unfortunate events? So, what she actually meant was probably they are not popular enough for us to sell them. Anyway, I went to my library and to see if they had the books there, and they only had The Hostile Hospital at the moment, so I settled with that one. And let me tell you, The Hostile Hospital, I remember just all of the creepy vibes. I really got into it. It is probably one of the most creepy books in the series, and for good reason. I mean, like, Violet gets drugged and, like, unconscious against her consent. That is some sort of crime. I mean, technically everything that Olaf does is a crime, but still. The chase scene with Esme also, like, really got me. I also, like, found it interesting that Klaus and Sunny got to work together for once, because often those two hadn't really had a lot of alone time. So I really thought it was nice. I also, like, found it so sad with, like, the whole library of records and how no one believed Baudelaire's. This book also, like, marked an official shift in the series. From them always being placed at a guardian, now they instead were on the run. And you can feel it even at the beginning, when they are at that little store and they desperately try to, like, send a message via Morse coding, and at the same time Olaf and the owner starts to chase them down the hall. Like, even in the first chapter, you get the chills. In number 6, we have The Vile Village. Hector is probably one of the best guardians they've had. It's also the last time we officially get to see Isadora and Duncan. And God, I feel like they know so much more than what we are made to believe. But I hope that they are fine up in the sky with Hector. It really sounds like they died, but one of my absolute favorite translations in this book is that in English, when they are in the cellar, Violet goes, "Rats!" And Klaus, like, jumps. It's like, where? Like, freaking out because he thinks it's a rat in the cellar, and Violet is like, no, I don't mean there's actual rats in the cellar, it was just like a saying. You know how the Swedish translation translates this? They let Violet instead say shit. And Klaus jumping because he thinks that someone has left shit in the cell. And that is probably the funniest translation ever. Number 5 is The Gruesome Grotto. We get to meet Fiona, which is one of the most iconic characters. I like the whole vibe of them, like, being underwater and, like, the threat of the medusoid mycelium. And, like, you know that And you know that when Sunny gets poisoned, you know that she will survive. But you still feel so worried, like, what if they go kill a baby? They could do that. This series is like really, really, really dark. But they wouldn't kill a child, would they? I mean, several children has implied to die in the background in fires, but not Sunny. Sunny survives. Spoilers, I guess, but like, we knew that, but it was still like pretty freaky, even if you knew that she would be okay. And I also love how like in the TV show, Fiona is like more arrogant towards Violet, but in the book, Fiona is like, oh my god, thank god Violet is here, I don't know how to do anything on this fucking submarine, thank god that Violet is here so she can help me. I also have to confess that the first time I read this book, I thought that Captain Withershins was funny. Like, I legitimately thought that this was like really a quirky man. He was so hilarious. And then I reread the book and I was like, oh my god, this is the most annoying man ever. I am so glad that he wasn't in the Netflix show. Also, the ones that are like rowing Olaf's submarine, it's claimed in the book that it is both the Snow Scouts but also like random kids that I am assuming also kidnapped. I mean, it was easier in the Netflix show because it was just the Snow Scouts, so like, okay, you knew where the Snow Scouts went, but the book is like, yeah, it was the Snow Scouts, but also like a bunch of Prufrock students too, and I was like, how did you get all of these Prufrock students? Did you just like put a bunch of students on a bus and was like, we're going on a field trip, and then they had to like be slaves on a submarine? It's also the thing with the books that we get less questions answered, so we never really know what happened to these kids afterwards. And I mean, that's also the charm with a series of unfortunate events. There's a lot of mysteries and a lot of us just like figuring stuff out for ourselves. Also, one of the most iconic moments when in the final scene of the book, when they are on Briny Beach again, and Mr. Pro is like, come with me, and they are like, no. That was so satisfying. Number 4 is The End. The longest book and very iconic in its own right. I am actually pissed that they only had one episode in the Netflix show, because there is so much you can do with this book. Like, the whole like revolution with the islands, the islanders, the people living on the island, they planned on doing a revolution against Ishmael. I can also say that Ishmael is probably the most annoying character in all of this series. Okay, no, that's a lie. Mr. Poe gets the first place because Mr. Poe has been in more books. But Ishmael, the second you meet this guy, he just gets on your nerves. The second he exclaims, I won't force you, you just like get reminded of like all of these people you have met in your life that had said the exact same thing, and like, yes, they won't force you, but it really feels like you should do how they say that you should do, because they feel like they know better. And you feel like if you don't do as they say, even if they won't force you, you feel like you're doing it wrong because they have like implied that you do. Horrible, horrible man. I still to this day wonder what would have happened if Kit actually had taken the goddamn apple, but like, what would happen, like, if she was already giving birth, like, as she ate the apple? Like, would the baby instantly die inside of her just because she ate one slice of an apple? Or, like, what? I mean, at least in Netflix, she gave birth and had some last moments with her child before she died, but still. I think it's a very beautiful ending to the whole franchise. And we finally find out what Beatrice stands for. And what is really, really interesting is that I figured out who Beatrice was, like, way before I read this book. So I don't know if I just got spoiled somewhere, or if I just assumed it. I guess I must have been spoiled because I was not at all surprised, and I also didn't know why everyone else was surprised because I was like, I figured it out from day one. But because everyone else was surprised, I think that I must have been spoiled about it somewhere and just forgot about it. Number 3. The Ersatz Elevator. This is really one of the most memorable books in the whole series. Everything from the whole scenery to everything being out and in, the whole penthouse, and the suspense with the Quagmires. Where are they? It's incredibly thrilling in all ways. And you, just like the Baudelaires, fall for the red herring. I am really disappointed in Jerome, who was like, yeah, but now when my wife has left me, I just will not be your guardian anymore, bye. That was a really dick move. Jerome, you could have helped them. And you just left them. All the adults fail the children in this society. Number 2 is the Auster Academy. Quagmires, we get a whole book with nothing but the Baudelaires finally getting some friends, and it's the Quagmire triplets, and it's so great. I also love the way they described Vice Principal Nero's laughter in the book, because in the book, his laughter is literally and I just think it's really funny with a grown man who laughs like that. We also have the introduction of Carmelita Spatz, also an iconic character. I really wonder what happened to the Quagmires after the Baudelaires move into the orphan shed. Because in the show, they got to live in a broom's closet, but in the book, I guess that they got some spare rooms when the new orphans arrived, which in that case, I think that the Baudelaires should have been able to sleep in the Quagmires' rooms. The Quagmires also said that they have been at the school for 3 semesters, and I don't believe that. I think that the Quagmires have been at the school for 3 weeks, and they are homeschooled kids. There is a headcanon that most of the fandom agrees with, that all the kids were homeschooled before the series starts. And so they don't know how, actual schools work, so they think, a school week is a semester. I also want to say the word semester is really fun, because semester in Swedish means vacation. That's a fun fact. It doesn't have to do with anything, but now you know. I love how I ignore canon. They say we have been here for 3 semesters, and I'm like, no, you have not. I don't believe it. I will ignore canon. The whole school, the whole atmosphere is characterized so well. You really, really feel like you're there. It's really one of my favorite books. I also just think that I like boarding school plots, so it could also be that. But my number 1 book is The Penultimate Peril. This is really when everything comes together. All of the characters, it's an all-star meeting for all the Asoue characters. I love all the random characters we meet. I love how the Baudelaires have to split up and do separate little adventures. I love the Denouement triplets, and also when I read the book I had no idea how to pronounce their last name. I think I pronounced it as Denouement, and I was like, this works, but I also knew that it was entirely wrong, and it wasn't until the Netflix series came out that I was like, aha! Denouement. I get it, okay. Side note, but when I first saw the cover of the movie as a child, I had no idea how to pronounce Baudelaire either. I thought it was a really long and complicated last name. I love all of the random running gags in this book, especially that random character that keeps referring to their mom. I don't know why, but that character really set a print in my head of always referring to their mom in every single situation, and for some reason that just made me cackle every single time. It's such a thrilling book from start to end, And I also know that it's a lot of other people's favorite book too, and I get why. It really deserves to be one of the best rated books. And that was my top 13 list. I hope that I didn't offend anyone by putting their favorite book too low, but as I mentioned in the beginning, I like all of these books, and I just happen to love the ones I put higher a bit more than I do with the ones I put lower. But all books serve some kind of purpose, and sometimes when books continue after each other, some of them will be a bit more like middle of the road and just like is there to get the plot going before the good parts comes in the next book. And that's okay. How would you rank these books? Tell me in the comments. And I'll see you next time. Farewell.